Welcome to the Heal Your Hunger Show, where we get to the heart of why you overeat and how to stop. If you struggle with food and weight like I did, welcome home. Welcome to the Heal Your Hunger Show. So happy to have you here. Thank you for joining me for another episode. Really happy to have you here. And we're coming up on the end of the contest for the most meaningful reviews on iTunes. So if you're somebody who's getting benefit from this show, please do us a favor and comment and make, create a iTunes review. It's super easy to do. But leave a review and also email us and let us know what you wrote. Just copy and paste your review and email us at reviews@healyourhunger.com. And the prize is a little care package with a really cool t-shirt called, it says Eat in Peace. And so this is like the just yummiest t-shirt, and it's beautiful. And I have one for myself. It's this beautiful sort of periwinkle color blue, and it's got blueberries on it, and it says Eat in Peace. And that's what I wish for all of us, is to eat in peace. And so you can win not only this t-shirt, but a signed copy of my book, Heal Your Hunger, 7 Simple Steps to End Emotional Eating Now, as well as my husband's book, which is called Love Notes from Hell, Stories of Addiction and Recovery. So you'll get a signed copy of his book and my book and the t-shirt in your size. Just make sure to leave a iTunes review that's meaningful. Just give a little thought into how you've been helped and impacted by the Heal Your Hunger show, or one particular episode, if it really spoke to you, how it helped you or how it touched you. And then just email the review to reviews@healyourhunger.com. And I thank you so much in advance for doing that. I really, really appreciate it. The contest ends this week, the 15th. And so make sure to get your reviews done. And we're going to pick 2 of the most meaningful reviews and send you a little care package. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. It's going to help somebody find us and hear the message that they are so longing for. Because as you know, this condition of emotional eating and struggling with food and weight is a horrific one. It's torturous. We live with this year in and year out, with a food obsession and the crazy attempts we make to control our weight and control our eating. And the worst thing is we live with it alone. We suffer in silence. And that does not have to be your path anymore, because there's hope and help available. I've been working with people alongside my husband for close to 30 years now, people who struggle with food and weight, and have watched them break free from their struggles and break free from the cravings and that incessant compulsion to overeat. So you can be free as well. And I'm really glad you're tuning in here. And I have a course called the 7 Simple Steps to End Emotional Eating Now. So there's lots of support available for you to really walk this path of freedom. So come along with us, please. Okay, this topic today is a great one. And it's basically all around food addiction. And I want to know, are you addicted to food? And you may be wondering if you are. You may be thinking, well, it sure seems like it. The way I eat, yeah, probably. And if you're wondering, that's a good thing. It's good if you're wondering, because you're tuned into the fact that it may be more than just an issue of liking food. For years, I'm like, oh, I just like food. And I was completely oblivious to the fact that I was truly addicted. So I have to say, it's there's a spectrum of consciousness and awareness of one's behavior that you're somewhere on that, along that path of awareness. And so this show today will help you get a little bit more clued in, a little bit more aware of what your patterns are, and if they really do qualify as an addiction. Now, I'll say right off the bat that you can actually take a quiz that I have on the homepage of my website, and I'll put it in the show notes as well. The quiz will actually tell you if you're an emotional eater or a food addict. So you can take the quiz, get a personalized score, and from there know what action steps you need to take. Now, I'll tell you that in my professional and personal experience, there is a spectrum of emotional eating. And on the high side of that spectrum is food addiction. On the low side is emotional eating. I find in my many years of study and research, as well as working with thousands of people, that there are really no non-emotional eaters, but there's people who really don't have a problem with emotional eating. And the reason why I say everybody is basically an emotional eater to some degree is because I believe our bodies and minds and taste buds and brains were made to have, we have certain pleasure centers in our brain, and we have affinities for certain tastes, and our taste buds are geared towards certain tastes and sensitivity to taste that can really light us up and light up those pleasure centers in our brain. And this is for the effect of basically prolonging the species. So I believe we all have some kind of emotional reaction to food where it is pleasurable enough that we'll continue to do it. And it's not just a physical thing solely. It's, there is some pleasure involved. And I believe God made us that way so that we would continue to eat. Because if it was really just, I could take it or leave it, some people might leave it and then they would die. So I believe for most people there is some sort of attachment that has an emotional quality, and that's a good thing, right? We need to like eating so that we will continue to subsist. That said, some people are a little further along the spectrum where they don't just enjoy food. There's people who enjoy food and then that's it. They end a meal and they don't think about food for another 4 or 5 hours until their tummies get hungry, and the hormone, the hunger hormone, sends off a signal to the brain that it's time to eat. There are others who don't ever have that hormone turn off. They're constantly getting signals that it's time to eat. Then there's people further along on the spectrum who, are emotionally attached, where they are needing food for reasons beyond nutritional. So food is very significant in their life, and this was the case with me, where food was love, food was companionship, food was friendship, food was my very best friend, and food filled all the holes in my soul. Something ooey gooey chewy, or popcorn or cookies or cake or ice cream, or all the, as I call them, the ooey gooey chewy foods. The 3 food groups that are my favorite are sugar, fat, and starch. So these food groups were the ones that would fill the holes. So when I was feeling lonely, depressed, isolated, like I didn't have a friend in the world, or stressed out or insecure, food would do it for me. Okay. It was my fix. And I had other fixes. I was a relief-seeking missile. And so I drank alcohol. I pursued relationships. I did a lot of addictive type activities. For me, I have an addictive personality. So if it was worth doing, it was worth overdoing. But the bottom line is food was always the ultimate for me, and the most satisfying in terms of shutting off my brain, making me feel loved, making me forget my problems. And so for me, food became such a delight so early on in my life that it was an obsession and a compulsion for most of my early part of my life, and I ate in a way that became progressively worse to the point of addiction. So I'm going to talk to you about where the different markers lie, but for me, I can wholeheartedly say I'm addicted to food. Does that mean I'm eating addictively now? No. But I could, and I certainly have the capacity. I'm not cured. I have freedom today, one day at a time. I'm grateful for being thin. I'm grateful for eating normal sized meals, and healthy meals, and really meals that nurture my body and my spirit. But that doesn't mean that I don't have the ability to go off the skids and eat in an addictive way. And my eating got to the point where it was so addictive that I would go out in the middle of the night and buy binge foods and sit in front of the television and eat until I was completely stuffed, and I'd pass out and wake up feeling so disgusting and sick and disappointed in myself and self-recriminating. So this is the way my food went. I could pack away 3,000 to 5,000 calories in a sitting because I was eating these empty calories. I mean, it was just packing in the grossest, most high fat, high sugar, high carb foods possible. So that's an addiction. Okay. And I'll go into more detail about the different signposts, but for me, it was totally addictive eating. And I'm also an emotional eater. So on this spectrum, and when you take the quiz, the emotional eating quiz, you're going to find yourself somewhere on the spectrum. But on the spectrum, it goes from emotional eating to food addiction. So you could be in the borderline between emotional eater and food addict, or just all the way. And you'll get a personalized score, as I said. But let's talk about really what it means to be an emotional eater. And then, if you're a food addict, you're an emotional eater on steroids. But to know where you stand has a lot to do with the level to which it affects your life. Okay. So, somebody may say I'm addicted to food, and they may be, but they may not really be that, ambitious to do anything about it because it's not really impacting them that much. It may bother them, but they may not do a whole lot about it. So part of being addicted to food has to do with the effect, the point at which, or the extent to which it's affecting your life. Now, you could not care that you're addicted to food and still be addicted to food, okay? So it's not what I'm saying. It's just that you can measure the level to which you're addicted by the impact it's having on your life. And I will say, a lot of people don't realize the impact it is having on their life. And this is one of the problems with addiction. Addiction is, it has the quality of denial built into it. Okay, so people who are addicted naturally, basically don't realize it. And if you've known an alcoholic, you might have experienced this, where a person could be destroying themselves with alcohol and have all kinds of excuses like, well, I still have my job, how bad can it be? Or, I'm a good father, so get off my back. Or, I'm still able to drive my kids to their swimming lessons, so, I'm really not that bad. So people with addiction will rationalize and come up with excuses to why their problem isn't really that bad. So I'm hoping that today you will listen and be clued in to a few signposts that you may have not realized you have and are actual signs of addiction. Now, emotional eaters in general, people who have some level of addictive eating, emotional eaters not only eat food for emotional reasons, but they eat food for psychological and emotional and reasons that have to do with their personality. And I write about this in my book. It's called The Anatomy of the Emotional Eater. And there's 24 traits that really mark the personality type of an emotional eater and a food addict. And so you can learn about that in my book or in my course, 7 Simple Steps to End Emotional Eating Now. But these traits are very typical for people with food issues, food and weight issues. If you struggle with food and weight, I can guarantee you struggle with people pleasing. Okay, you're a people pleaser, and you want desperately to be liked, and you go to great lengths to be well thought of, well spoken of, and to be liked. Okay, that's like the number one trait of emotional eater. Other traits, we're very fearful. We tend to have anxiety and worry. We have racing minds. Our head never stops. That's why meditation seems like such a tall order for us, because it's like, how could I meditate? I never stop thinking. My mind's racing all the time. There's a lot of other traits as well. We're very sensitive and we feel very deeply. So where other people are like, they have some trouble and then they've moved on from it, we're like aching over it or aching over situations in our life that other people have moved on from. So there's a lot of different aspects to being an emotional eater / food addict that are particular to us. Not that we made these emotions up or we have a corner on the market, but we definitely have a personality composite that is our own. And this personality composite actually leads to emotional eating, leads to using food in an abusive or self-abusive way. So it's important to know what those are. I'm not going to go any more into that because I've done shows on that, and you can read it in my book. But let's talk about addiction now, not just emotional eating. Like, how do you know if you're actually tipped over into this the side of the spectrum that is food addiction? And I want to talk about one qualification that is used by alcoholics in Alcoholics Anonymous, and they have their text, their book called The Big Book. In that book, this is written in over 75 years ago, I think 80 years ago, but it was written as a simple way of identifying whether you're an alcoholic or not. But I find that it applies to any kind of addiction. I mean, the guys in Alcoholics Anonymous, they figured stuff out about addiction that hasn't been beat yet. I mean, it is fundamental truth about addiction, and has certainly helped me tremendously. But what they say in their text is, if when you want to, you find that you can't quit drinking entirely is what they're talking about. If you can't quit entirely, or you have little control over the amount you take, you're probably an alcoholic. Well, let's translate that to the emotional eater or the food addict. If when you want to, you find you can't quit overeating or eating out of control altogether, or when eating, you find you have little control over the amount you eat, you're probably a food addict. Okay, so here we are. This is the first way that I'm going to describe how to identify if you're addicted to food. If when you want to, you find you cannot stop overeating entirely, like you can't just put a lid on it and say, no more overeating for me, no more ice cream for me, no more cookies for me, that's it, never again. If you can't do that, or if when you're eating, like you've already said yes to something, you have no self-control over the amount that you ingest, you're probably a food addict, okay? Very simply put. That certainly applies to me. I mean, I've never said, no and stayed stopped. I mean, it's the grace of God that I don't overeat today, but not by any willpower of my own. And that's what they're saying is if you don't have the willpower to say no and stay stopped, or if you don't have the power to eat one and then stop, you're probably an addict. You're probably an alcoholic or addicted, whatever it is that you substitute those words for. So that certainly is a great way to identify if you're food addicted. Another way is to identify the classic signs of addiction. Okay, so this classic signs of addiction, this has, science has put out these signs and written about this, extensively, and it applies to all addiction. This is how researchers and people in the medical field have determined if something is an addiction, if somebody is doing something addictively. For one, they have cravings. Okay, so if they stop and they have cravings for that item or that substance or activity, this can, they call them process addictions. I mean, addictions like sex or porn addiction, gambling, shopping. I mean, these, stealing, these things have been identified as addictions when they have these classic signs of addictions, one of which is craving. So if you stop doing it and you crave it, like you feel like physically craving of those things, if you have craving symptoms like they give mice sugar. Okay, let's talk about the addiction to sugar. They give mice sugar, and mice, their teeth chatter when they have cravings, or when they have withdrawal symptoms. They crave the substance, and And that's a sign of addiction. Tolerance is a sign of addiction. And this is when, again, the pleasure centers in your brain are being lit up. When you eat something that's addictive, you get very excited. I know this happened for me with sugar and carbs and fats. The ooey gooey chewies, a donut or a pastry or something exciting for me. Like I'd eat that and I get so excited, I'd want more. Well, one piece was never enough for me, and we built up a tolerance and where we have to eat more to get the same sense of satisfaction. The same pleasure centers in the brain won't light up unless we increase the amount that we're eating. And that can happen with food addiction, especially with an addictive substance like sugar, which has been known to be just as addictive as heroin or cocaine. Withdrawal symptoms. If you go into severe, if you have headaches, if you cry a lot, if you get really ornery when you don't have your substance, when you don't have your goodies, these can be symptoms of withdrawal, where you literally are withdrawing from the substance and you're crawling the walls and having physical symptoms and emotional symptoms. These are classic signs of addiction. Another is obsession, okay? If you have thoughts about the substance, if you can't stop thinking, you can't turn off your brain to stop fantasizing about the vending machine and what candy bars you're going to buy, or about the food that's down at in the break room, or whatever the case may be. If you can't stop obsessing about food, this is a sign of addiction. So there's a lot, and there are more signs, but you could probably get the idea right from what I've talked about so far, that you're probably, if you have these symptoms, you're probably addicted to food. And some people argue that food's a real addiction, but anybody who's had it won't argue it. Another sign of addiction is if it's affecting your life. And again, you may be in denial and may be thinking, oh, the only one I'm hurting is me. Well, let's take a closer look. It's really important to know that if you're having health issues, most health issues are either caused or exacerbated by unhealthy eating. And that's the saddest thing about emotional eating and food addiction, is that it literally impairs our health, and it happens slowly. You don't just eat a cheeseburger one day and drop dead, okay, or have a heart attack. No. You have to eat a lot of cheeseburgers. You have to have a healthy, steady diet of not just cheeseburgers, but things that are fatty and cheesy and, clog your arteries, lots of meats and fried foods. These things will cause serious health issues. And so if you're struggling from heart disease or diabetes, or if you've had a stroke, or your arteries are clogged, or you have to have a stent, so many different issues in your life that are health related are usually eating related. And so, but it sneaks up on you, right? It really sneaks up on you. You may have been thin for years, in which case you thought you could get away with eating anything you want. And then in later life, you put on the weight, you start packing on pounds, and you're not, you show up at your 30th reunion and you're not looking as good as you used to. That's because it snuck up on you, and you might have thought that you were doing fine because you didn't have a weight issue. Personally, I always had a weight issue. I gained weight very easily, and I was a fat kid. But not everybody has that experience. Sometimes it comes on later when people's hormones change and their metabolism slows down. But the bottom line is the food is having a deleterious effect on your health. And this is a sign of addiction. When you're eating, even though it's destroying your body, and you do it anyway, okay? You're eating in spite of what these foods are doing to you. That's a sign of addiction, because nobody is completely oblivious. I mean, you can't live in this day and age and not know that fried foods are going to be an unhealthier choice than a salad. salad, or some kind of vegetables. I mean, you're living under a rock if you don't know that. But doesn't matter because you choose the fried foods anyway. Why would you do such a thing when you know better? I mean, nobody wants to be sick. Nobody wants to be, holed up in a hospital with health issues. You do it because there's a draw there that you don't have control over. You can't control the amount you take, or you can't stop overeating entirely. Other issues that come up when you're addicted to food, there's some serious behavioral symptoms, like lying about the food that you've eaten. If you're lying about the food you've eaten, if you steal food. I mean, I used to steal food from the grocery store, and I didn't need to. I had money, but when I was in that binge mode, that really dark consciousness of I don't really give a crap, like I don't care what happens to me, because I was so dark and I was so self-abusive, and it was just sort of like, kick me when I'm down, like I almost welcomed it. Well, I would steal food, and I did get caught once. I was in Harvard Square in Boston, where I'm from, and I stole something. It wasn't even food, actually. I stole something. I just didn't care. I didn't care. And I wasn't even totally conscious that I was selling it, because stealing it, because they had two stores and a bridge between the two stores. When it's cold out, you can walk through over the bridge. But anyway, I got caught for stealing. But I would steal food as well, just stick a candy bar in my pocket. And I didn't do it very often. But the point is, when I was really down in the dumps and in binge mode, it was just adding insult to injury. It was just more of that self-abuse, to live in fear of getting caught for stealing something, especially so stupid as a Cliff Bar or a candy bar or something. So stealing, lying, hiding food. If you've ever hidden food, that's not normal. Okay. It's not normal. If you have hangovers from eating sugar, or like a comatose state from eating too much sugar, that's not normal. Stuffing yourself, puking because you've eaten so much, you put your finger down in the throat so you can eat more, or so you don't feel so stuffed. That's not normal. The withdrawal I told you about before, your job could be affected. I mean, you may not think so, but are you thinking about food all day long? I mean, are you obsessed with food and what you're going to eat when you get off of work? What fast food store you're going to stop at on your way home? That's, I promise you, affecting your job. You're not present for your job. Your family, you're not present for your family when you're thinking about food all day long. When you're with your kids and you're going, and all you're thinking about is, how can I get them to their activities so I can go eat? How can I put them down for the night, get them to sleep so I can enjoy food in front of the television? I mean, it robs us of our attention. It robs us of being present with people that we love. So it's affecting us more than we realize. Mood swings, emotional eaters are moody people. We're deep feeling, and we have a lot of feelings, and we are very mercurial in our moods. So we can swing wildly in our moods. We can be super happy and high at one point. Maybe it's a sugar high because you just had your favorite food, so life is good. And then you crash. You have a sugar crash, or you overate and you feel so mad at yourself that you become bitchy, and nobody knows why, like what happened. They thought you were doing good, and all of a sudden you're a monster. So these are some of the issues. If you're trying to control what you eat, if you're trying to control it, or if you're very controlling, if you're anorexic or you're a restrictor, what are you restricting? Well, your chances are you're restricting something that's out of control. We don't control things unless they're out of control, or we fear being out of control. And so chances are, if we're like doing a lot of controlling things, we've I heard of one gal one time. I was at an OA meeting 30 plus years ago, and a woman talked about wearing when she cooked, she wore a surgical mask. That's how she controlled it. Well, that's one way to go, but there's a lot better way. You can heal so you don't have to wear a surgical mask when you cook, to just avoid eating. Some people don't eat for until noon or 1 p.m. just so they don't lose control in the morning. I mean, there's a lot of machinations we go through to try to control our eating behavior. But if you're trying to control it, trust me, it's out of control and there's a better solution. But the point is, it's probably a sign of food addiction. Now, emotional eaters can have a lot of these same traits as well. Emotional eaters are on their way to becoming food addicts. The only real difference between an emotional eater and a food addict is their ability to pull back or scale back. Okay, so they may be addictive in their eating, but if they have some, I have friends who say, oh yeah, I have a binge now and then, but I just work out more in the gym, and that levels out their weight and they're fine. Or, I just go on a diet for a couple weeks and that seems to work for them and they get back in control. Or they do a spa, once a quarter and they get fixed up by some swanky spa that makes them, wheat grass every day and they do yoga. So these are all efforts at control, trust me. So these are all efforts at controlling something that is out of control. But if it works for people and it's not, they don't feel tortured in it, and that's just kind of a way of going about this for people and they're not bothered by it, well, I say it's not a problem till it's a problem. Personally, that's not a solution. I know that one can be free from the compulsion and obsession to overeat. So doing, a spa just to clean things up, or detox after eating crappy for a while, that wouldn't be good for me. That would just be a merry-go-round. It'd be expensive because I would eat unclean often and I'd have to go to a spa often. But the point is, people find what works for them. And for those who aren't happy with their weight, that's the ultimate test of whether you should be taking action to do something about it. You don't even have to decide if you're an emotional eater or a food addict, or you don't have to let the quiz tell you what you should do about it. If you're not happy with the way you eat, if you don't like thinking about food 24/7, or you don't like the way it affects your relationships because you'd rather not be with your kids so you could eat, that's reason enough to take action and do something about it. And so it's really important to know that only you can determine if you have a problem to whatever degree. If you have a problem that you want to heal from, if you want to overcome your obsession with food and weight, whatever that looks like, that's the very most important first step, and you can do that. Some people are 5 pounds overweight and it destroys them. They've been thin all their life, and that 5 extra pounds drives them nuts. Somebody who's obese might not understand that. They may think that person's crazy. They should just be grateful. Well, I've been thin and 5 pounds overweight, and I know how crazy making that can be. I mean, if you're a true emotional eater / food addict, wherever you are on the spectrum, if you really have this problem to any kind of degree, it's going to bother you to have extra weight on you, and oftentimes more so if you're thin and it's only 5 pounds. It can really drive somebody batty. And that's especially true if you've been fat and lost the weight, and then you've put on some. That sometimes can be the worst because you're so afraid of getting fat again. You live in terror of going back there from whence you just come. So other signposts, apathy. If you become depressed, like you just don't care and you just eat and you just live in your black yoga pants and with crumbs on them and stains and you're just in that terribly dark place, that's a symptom of food addiction by every account. Your life gets smaller. You may have suicidal thoughts. I mean, this is a killing condition. I mean, you may think more of an alcoholic having suicidal thoughts, not if you're overeating, but trust me, I've been there. I've wanted to commit suicide on account of not being able to stop eating and feeling like I'm never going to get control again. That's a really dark place, and that can happen. I mean, and that's a sign of addiction as well. I mean, it can be fatal. So, and other people are commenting. If your kids are begging you to do something about your weight, if your husband is commenting on, packing on the pounds or on your out of control eating, that's a signpost. So as you can see, there's a lot of signposts, declining invitations from friends. It can affect your relationships in that way. Lost opportunities. I mean, you feel crappy about yourself, and so you give up opportunities. You sabotage opportunities. These are signposts for addiction as well. So I've given you a lot here to think about, and a lot of signposts that you can start to contemplate and see if they are signposts that you relate to. But the bottom line is, as I said, if it bothers you, if your eating bothers you, then that's reason enough to do something about it. And we all, we have different thresholds of pain. Some people can take a whole lot more pain than I could. That's why I got help at 21 years old, because I was in so much pain by 21. I couldn't possibly have fathomed living, that hell of food obsession and yo-yo dieting and binging. And the darkness that goes with it for another day. It was so awful. So I was blessed. I was blessed with, a very high threshold for pain, or maybe it's low. I get that confused, but you know what I mean? Like I got in pain fast, and I wanted out of the pain like quickly. So I hope that happens to you. It's really a blessing. It's a blessing if you hate being fat. It's a blessing if you feel miserable about your weight and want to do something about it. I mean, hating your weight isn't a good thing. I'm not saying that's good, but if it prompts you to look underneath at the underlying causes, you can have a much happier life, because the food's a symptom. It's not the problem. The weight is a symptom of overeating, and overeating is a symptom of what's eating you. So, it's really not about the food. It's not about the weight. But if those things are getting your attention and causing you to go deeper, which is what Heal Your Hunger is all about, well, then that's a good thing. Then it's serving you. It is serving you. It's your tormentor, and it's driving you to seek a much higher and better way. So I certainly would welcome offering you information about that. You can find out here about how to do that. But the most important thing is that you don't have to live in torture anymore. You do not have to hate your body and hate yourself for the way you eat. And frankly, the way you're eating is not your fault. I mean, you don't have the information. You haven't had the information about the anatomy of the emotional eater, about the underlying causes. I mean, you've been chasing diets and it hasn't worked. It's not meant to work, and it's not your fault. So I hope you'll reach out for help, and I'm really grateful that you've stuck with me here. And this is not an easy topic. Food addiction is not an easy topic, but check out the quiz for sure, and just see what your score is. See where you score on the spectrum, and then you can go from there. So thanks so much. God bless you, and I will see you in the next show. Take care.
If you enjoyed this show and want to get free support, insider health info, exclusive invites to events, and more, visit healyourhunger.com.